Welcome to News for Scotland on the Scotland Channel. Here are this week's news headlines.
English UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer was forced to quickly intervene after Donald Trump, who was in Scotland this week, appeared to suggest that all the benefits of a UK-US trade deal should go to Scotland. Speaking at a press conference with Starmer, held at Trump's Turnberry Golf Resort in Ayrshire, the President was asked about the UK-US trade deal and the potential benefits for Scotland. Trump replied, "Well, I assume when we do our trade deal overall, a lot of it comes to Scotland. I hope maybe all of it should go to Scotland," he added. Alarmed, Starmer then quickly interrupted, saying, "It's a very good deal for the whole of the United Kingdom, and we have already achieved great things on the deal, and will achieve even more as we work together." Pointing to the fact that his mother, Mary Ann, was born in Scotland, Trump added, "I was very particular. This is a part of the world I want to see thrive. It's going to thrive." Trump then went on to attack clean energy and praise far-right politician Nigel Farage, who is widely expected to be imposed on Scotland as the next English UK Prime Minister, not the best optics for Starmer. Angry parents have hit out at an Aberdeenshire private school for allowing the school's pipe band to play for US President and convicted felon Donald Trump, who was friends with notorious paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Trump was visiting his golf course at Many Aberdeenshire when he was welcomed by pipers from Robert Gordon's college band on Tuesday. Parents expressed both anger and concern at the engagement, given Trump's links to Epstein and his refusal to publish sealed files about Epstein's sex crimes, in which it has been reported that he is named, a claim Trump rejects. "Even if you put his politics aside, he's just a reprehensible character," said one parent. Another described the event as lamentable, adding, "I know that many parents are quite incensed at the fact that children were involved in this, given that the Epstein report is still up in the air."
An American radio audience of nearly 4 million listeners now know about attempts by a liberation group to have Scotland decolonized at the United Nations, despite a mainstream media blackout on the story in the UK. Liberation Scotland submitted their formal submission of an advance notice of petition to the United Nations Special Committee on Decolonization on March 7th and were invited to take part in a 50-minute interview on WBAI Radio's On the Fly show. Liberation Scotland representatives Craig Murray, Professor Alf Baird, and Sarah Salyers gave a 50-minute interview on WBAI Radio during a visit to New York. They told an audience of 4 million U.S. listeners that Scotland is at the UN to end the dominion of a foreign state over Scotland. Professor Baird spoke directly to the U.S.'s many sons and daughters of the clearances, with this reminder: colonialism was not just directed at Black communities in Africa or in Asia, it was directed also at white communities. That's the reality we face. It's a difficult reality, but we also now have legal advice in Scotland that the Union is a fraud. It was never implemented. Scotland was subsumed. It was annexed, its territory exploited, its people discarded to the four corners of the earth. There are so many Scots in North America. We all have relatives all over the world. That's what's called banishment of the natives in post-colonial theory, and Scotland had the biggest banishment of natives next to Ireland in Europe, he said. You can hear the broadcast here at the address shown on screen. To learn more about the annexation of Scotland under the guise of the Treaty of Union, watch our film Fake State exclusively on the Scotland Channel.
An independent Scotland asking to rejoin the EU would be welcomed by the majority of Europeans, according to the latest YouGov Eurotrack survey. Pollsters found that up to 75% said they support an independent Scotland joining the EU. The poll was carried out in Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. In all of those countries, very few people, only about 1 in 10, said they would be opposed to Scotland rejoining. In fact, the strongest opposition to an independent Scotland rejoining the EU doesn't come from within the EU, but from the rest of the UK. Around 1/3 of people in England oppose an independent Scotland rejoining. However, almost half would support it, and the rest have no strong view. This means that even south of the border, most people would either welcome Scotland's return to the EU or believe it's for Scots to decide. In Scotland, a massive 70% now want to rejoin the EU. Back in 2016, every part of Scotland voted to remain in the EU, Since then, support for rejoining has only grown, with recent polls showing that almost 3/4 of Scots are now in favour of EU membership. During the 2014 independence referendum, Scots were told that leaving the UK would mean losing their place in the EU. The UK government even sent a leaflet to every household claiming that voting to stay in the UK was the only way to protect Scotland's voice at the EU's top table. Just 2 years later, Scotland was dragged out of the EU against its will, leaving many feeling lied to and betrayed. As the reality of Brexit sinks in, more and more Scots see the mounting costs and damage, while Westminster does little to fix the mess it created. Brexit has cost the Scottish economy £4 billion, whilst Britain's goods exports have slumped compared with the rest of the G7, leaving Scottish businesses even more limited options for exports. To make matters worse, Scotland has no say over the UK government's planned Brexit reset, which is so far mostly a fudge. Labour is too scared of reform to make meaningful change. Most of the subjects opened up for discussion are nowhere near having an impact. UK politicians are increasingly lying about Scotland, and these lies are going unchallenged by Anglo-British mainstream media. The latest example of this was from UK Environment Secretary Steve Reid, who was allowed to state unchallenged on Channel 4 News that publicly owned Scottish Water is producing worse outcomes than England's scandal-hit private water firms. The English Labour Minister said that pollution levels in Scotland are worse than they are in England, which is totally untrue. Scottish Water, the publicly owned utility company that provides water and wastewater services in Scotland, responded to Reid's comments saying, "Scottish Water is the UK's top-performing water company and most trusted utility in the UK, according to the Customer Service Institute," a spokesperson said. In addition to producing world-class drinking water, the independent regulator, SEPA, says 87% of water bodies in Scotland are either good or excellent, the highest proportion ever. The Independent Water Commission, led by Sir John Cunliffe, found 66% of Scotland's water bodies to be of good ecological status, compared to just 16.1% in England and 29.9% in Wales. Customer satisfaction is 81% in Scotland and only 55% in England. Scottish Water incurred just one fine of £6,000 in the last year for breaking environmental regulations last year, compared with the multi-million-pound fines for egregious and repeated flouting of the rules by several of England's privatised water businesses. Scotland's water charges are also much less than the English average. BBC Breakfast came under fire recently when they presented the rise in water bills as an average £10 a month for England and 10% for Scotland. Of course, that hid the reality that the average rise for Scotland is £3.68, about one-third of the English rise. The gulf in average water charges between England and Scotland is widening over time, and Scotland has a more progressive way of helping the poorest households with water bills based on their council tax band. Although water in Scotland remains, largely, in public ownership, it does face challenges, including the way the Victorian plumbing system was designed across the UK, which means that storm drains and household waste often feed into the same sewerage system. Whilst it is not possible to rebuild it completely, Scottish Water spends more in infrastructure than England, which pays more to private shareholders than repairing its infrastructure. Despite charging lower bills, between 2002 and 2018, Scottish Water invested on average nearly 35% more per household than English water companies, according to researchers at Greenwich University. That is essentially because money paid to Scottish Water does not go on dividends to shareholders. In England, the water companies have paid £52 billion in dividends to shareholders since 1990.
Misinformation in Anglo-British mainstream media is at an all-time high, which is why supporting channels such as ours is vitally important, so that as many Scots as possible know what is really being done to their country and hidden from view by those who should be holding power to account. As democracy in Britain is increasingly under attack by the government in England determined to remove any criticism of its actions, channels like the Scotland Channel are vital to everyone who values free speech and real democracy. The Scotland Channel, unlike the compliant British media, will always stand up for Scotland and Scotland's right to determine her own future whenever the people of Scotland decide, not the government of another country. You can support the Scotland channel, and it will only cost you a few seconds of your time. Like and share this show on your social media and tell friends, family, and work colleagues about us. Putting together an alternative to mainstream media without the funding that establishment billionaires put into channels like GB News is expensive. So, if you can afford to donate to this channel whilst we build our audiences to become self-sustaining, please consider doing so. Donations can be made via our website, thescotlandchannel.tv/#donate. Thank you.
Momentum is growing for an end to the UK and a move away from a centralised state in London setting policy for its benefit, according to campaign group Believe in Scotland. Northern Ireland is moving towards support for unification, where the Sinn Féin First Minister of Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill, and her party leader, Mary Lou MacDonald, recently met with international diplomats at Westminster to discuss the future of Northern Ireland. A game-changing report has revealed that the cost to Ireland of absorbing Northern Ireland has been greatly exaggerated by the English UK government in London. The real cost would work out as less than 1% of the island's GDP for the first year, easily affordable for the Republic of Ireland. Wales has also suffered from the UK's centralised economic policy and often lost out on resources, such as infrastructure spend. The UK government annoyed many in Wales by claiming, for example, that HS2 counted as infrastructure spend for Wales. They suffer in a similar way to Scotland from the fallout of energy privatisation. Like Scotland, Wales is a net exporter of electricity, but it doesn't see any benefit. Bills for Welsh consumers are high, and the profits go to private shareholders and to energy firms owned by other countries and sold off by the English state. Poverty is high, especially among families, and the Wales Bevan Foundation is calling for Wales to emulate what Scotland is doing as a powerful and effective way to lift children out of poverty. In Scotland, the long-term trend is firmly towards support for Scottish independence. A recent poll by Norstat gave 59% support for independence if Scotland also became a republic. The same effect was seen in the results when Scots were asked how they would vote if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister of the UK. 6 out of 10 say they would back independence. Even people who don't wish for independence think it is coming. Almost 2/3 of Scots say the UK will break up within a decade, and half think it will take just 5 years, according to polling by Ipsos Mori. Brexit has increased the momentum towards the breakup of the UK. Over time, the Brexit effect is strengthening, with barriers to trade between the UK and Northern Ireland increasing. Brexit was forced on Scotland despite a united vote by the country to remain in the EU. Since then, the damage to Scotland's economy and the opportunities and life chances of its citizens has grown. However, the London-centred UK media is in denial about the increasing momentum for change. But it is time that the Westminster establishment faces facts and starts to plan for a post-UK future, concluded Believe in Scotland. The British state's reaction to peaceful Gaza protesters is a sign of its weakness, according to former British ambassador Craig Murray. He was speaking after 3 women arrested for damaging a perimeter fence at the Leonardo Weapons Facility in Edinburgh were initially charged with malicious mischief, but hours later were charged under Section 57 of the Terrorism Act 2000. One of the women is well-known Glaswegian comedian, actor and writer Susan Riddell. Craig Murray suggested that UK representatives of the Israeli state, who seem to be controlling things here, had the charges changed within a few hours. Murray said the women had been held incommunicado for 5 days and were assigned duty lawyers, even though friends and family had organised top-flight legal counsel, who would have been able to show that the charge of terrorism for slightly damaging a fence isn't a competent one. Murray said that the British state's reaction is a sign of its weakness, as it knows that the Zionist narrative it has been feeding the public through the BBC and other lamestream media that Israel can do no wrong, that it has a right to self-defense, that it's forever the victim, that any criticism of the Zionist entity is anti-Semitic, is collapsing. The British state is in full panic mode, he said. The British state wants to make an example of decent people who are sickened by genocide. But, he predicted, that no Edinburgh jury will ever convict the women of terrorism. English UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been told he belongs in The Hague for failing to call out and act on the genocide being committed in Gaza by Israel. Starmer faced fierce criticism following a speech where he said, "The appalling scenes in Gaza are unrelenting," and called for the need for a regional, lasting peace. But he was told his government is complicit in the suffering of tens of thousands of people in Gaza due to his inaction against Israel, as 221 MPs signed a cross-party letter organised by the Labour backbencher Sarah Champion demanding Starmer recognise a Palestinian state. Starmer's government continues to provide support for Israel, including spy missions over Gaza and military aid and training for Israeli soldiers. An increasingly embarrassed Starmer, trying to look as if he is taking any meaningful action to prevent the carnage. This week said the UK will follow France's lead and recognise a Palestinian state, but only if Israel fails to meet his list of demands. Former Labour MP Zara Sultana said on social media that the appalling scenes in Gaza have been enabled by the arms, surveillance and diplomatic cover Keir Starmer's Labour government have provided to the genocidal apartheid state of Israel. John Swinney's bid to deliver an SNP majority in next year's 2026 Scottish elections has been branded an act of self-preservation by Scottish Greens leadership candidate Ross Greer, who said that a vote for any pro-independence party should count whatever the First Minister says. The First Minister this week insisted that a majority of SNP MSPs at the Holyrood 2026 election is the only route to achieving a legally recognised referendum, and he urged Scottish voters to back the SNP on both the constituency and regional lists. This approach continues to be criticised for allowing unionists in through the back door because of the UK-devised Holyrood voting system. The idea that only England, posing as the UK, can authorise a legally recognised referendum is also being questioned throughout many parts of the independence movement. Many people within the movement believe that the UK will never allow a second referendum, given how close the result of the last one was. This is not a strategy to secure Scotland's independence. It's a plan for self-preservation by the SNP, and, ironically, it is profoundly anti-democratic, said Greer. Every vote for pro-independence parties next May is a vote for independence, whatever the First Minister says, he added. Former SNP MP Joanna said the strategy was back to the future. Cherry said the strategy wouldn't work the same as it did in 2011 when so many have lost faith in the SNP to govern well or deliver. Alba MSP Ash Regan also accused Swinney of pursuing the most cynical side of politics. The SNP were given the power to deliver independence. They abused that trust, yet have the audacity to be back 9 months from the next election, begging for more from independence voters, she said. The Scotland Channel doesn't just bring you the news, but offers a wide range of television viewing as well. Catch up with shows, including our true crime documentary, Who Shot Willie McRae, the murder that authorities have been covering up for more than 40 years, or our film about Scotland's most iconic contemporary landmark, the Kelpies. The Scotland Channel aims to showcase Scotland, so if you love all things Scottish, the Scotland Channel is definitely for you. Watch current shows via our YouTube channel at the Scotland Channel or on tablets, phones and laptops at thescotlandchannel.tv. Thanks for watching.